I never planned this, never. For years, I wore this mask, comfortable, unassuming, allowing them to see me as nothing more than a modest shadow, Sophie, out there in consulting. While at night and dawn, I built something monumental out of glass and steel, an empire, mine. But that day, at Marcus's wedding, his words, so light, so habitually cruel, cut through that neat canvas of lies, and something clicked inside me. The Grand Plaza sparkled like a gilded candy, the crystal dazzled, the champagne foamed in the glasses, and the air hummed with muffled laughter and the clink of spoons on porcelain. It was precisely the kind of pomp my brother adored, cheap theater for demonstrating imaginary success. I stood by the column, smoothing a modest crease in the dark blue silk with my palm. This dress was my shield, it screamed, "I'm nobody, pass by." "Sophie?" My mother's voice, always slightly tense when she spoke of me. I turned around. "There you are, why aren't you talking? Everyone's asking about you." Her gaze, quick, scanning, unerring, slid from my shoes to my hair, then lingered on my dress. Her lips, lined with expensive lipstick, pursed slightly. "Although I suppose you don't have much to brag about." I raised the glass to my lips, the cold gold of the champagne burned my tongue. Just yesterday, I sat at the head of a polished ebony table, where 10 men in suits that cost as much as Marcus's annual salary hung on my every word. We had just swallowed our main competitor. I could still taste that metallic, sharp taste of victory. "I'm doing well, Mom, consulting keeps me sharp." She sighed, that same heavy, frustrated sigh I'd heard since I was 17. "Being busy doesn't mean being successful, dear." Her eyes softly searched the crowd for Marcus. "Look at your brother, the youngest vice president in the history of Sterling Industries, and he's marrying the CEO's daughter. There, that sounds like success." The corners of my lips twitched. Sterling Industries, they'd been falling apart for the last 3 quarters. Their CEO, Mr. Harrison, has been bombarding my office with letters for 3 months now, begging for 15 minutes of my time. He didn't know his future daughter-in-law was now looking at me with pitiful disdain. "Sophie." Marcus's voice cut through the din, commanding and loud. He approached, beaming in his tuxedo, and Jessica, in a dress that cost more than my first car, hung on his arm like an expensive accessory. Still hiding in corners at parties, some things never change. Jessica giggled, adjusting the diamond pendant on her graceful neck. "Oh, Marcus told me all about your little consulting job. It's so sweet of you to try and make it on your own." "A little job." The words hung in the air. I looked at his smug face and saw the 15-year-old boy who'd copied my algebra. I graduated with a gold medal. He, thanks to his dad's calls. Then there was that conversation. "Marcus needs a start, Sophie, he needs a position. And you're a smart girl, you'll enjoy even a little job." Poor little sister. Marcus raised his voice, playing to the audience, "Still working at that tiny company while the rest of us are building real careers. But hey, at least you can say you're independent, right?" Jessica laughed again, the sound was sharp, like cracking ice. "Oh, dear, be polite, not everyone can be as successful as you." I felt the smooth metal surface of the locket on my chest beneath my fingers, Grandma's locket, her last gift, and her words, whispered when everyone had already turned away, "Fly, my sweetheart, high, high, and let them see only the shadow of your wings." Success comes in different forms, Marcus, I breathed so quietly he barely heard. Of course, he waved his hand, brushing away a pesky fly. "Speaking of success, have you heard? The CEO of Sterling is actually coming to the wedding reception today, Mr. Harrison himself. He never attends employee events, but for me." He straightened, his chest puffed out proudly. My mouth turned sweet with anticipation. I knew why James Harrison had come here, to this posh hall. He was on the brink of despair. His last letter reeked of respectful panic. I dragged my feet, savoring every minute, knowing he would bolt like a cornered animal. "That's wonderful," I said, my smile safely hidden behind the rim of my glass. Marcus leaned toward me, his face suddenly serious, condescendingly instructive. "And please, try not to embarrass me when he arrives. Just stay in the background, it's important for my career." His eyes begged and commanded at the same time. Silence fell suddenly, thick and ringing, as if someone had muted the entire room. All heads turned toward the entrance. He had arrived. James Harrison, he floated through the crowd, not pushing people aside, but simply forcing them to part, tall, with gray hair styled with impeccable severity, and a gaze that seemed icy from a distance. That's how I remembered him from the screen, a man who doesn't ask, but demands. Marcus shuddered as if struck by an electric shock. He straightened his back, his face frozen in a respectful mask, and he pulled Jessica along with him, preparing to rush toward his deity. One step, two, but before he could take three, Harrison's icy eyes slid over him and found me, and melted. No, not melted, a sharp, lively interest flared in them. He changed course. "Miss Mitchell." His voice, accustomed to commanding the halls, cut through the silence. He walked straight toward me, purposefully, brushing aside everything in his path, including Marcus, who had frozen mid-step. "I had no idea you'd be here." I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Marcus's face first flushed with pride at being noticed, then whitened with bewilderment. Beside him, Jessica blinked, her perfect eyebrows creeping up to her hairline. Harrison was already in front of me, and his hand, strong, with short-trimmed nails, extended to shake mine, not as if he were a woman, but as if he were an equal. No, not even that, with a slight, respectful bow. "We've been trying to arrange a meeting for weeks," he continued, his voice filled with genuine relief. "I didn't expect to see you at a coworker's wedding." I felt the heat from dozens of eyes fixed on us, but most of all, the icy gaze of Marcus, who watched my hand meet his god's. I shook it, firmly, as I always do. "Hello, James, surprised to see me here?" He gave a short, dry smile. "Why should I be surprised? It's not every day you meet the CEO of Aurora Consulting at a corporate wedding." The words hung in the air, clear as a gong. CEO of Aurora Consulting. He glanced at Marcus, frozen 3 steps away, then back at me. Something clicked in his eyes. The puzzle came together. "Wait a minute, Marcus, your brother?" I nodded slowly, letting the corners of my lips twitch in something that wasn't a smile at all. Although he didn't know about my position until that moment. The silence that followed was absolute. I heard the clink of glassware on a waiter's tray somewhere, and the sound seemed deafening. I saw my mother's hand, clutching a glass, tremble, the pale pink liquid dancing around the rim. I saw my father's jaw drop, revealing perfect, expensive veneers, but Marcus's face, oh, his face, the entire melodrama played out on it, like a screen, first dull incomprehension, then the slow, agonizing penetration of truth, and then, pure, animal horror, the horror of a man who had just mocked the man on whose word his entire life now depended. James Harrison looked from me to him, his eyebrows rising. "Your brother?" "But he said his sister works for a small local consulting firm." I paused, letting each word sink in like a stone in a well. "That's what they all thought." My voice rang out calmly and clearly, cutting through the tense silence. I never corrected them. There was a loud, crystal-clear pop. The glass of white wine slipped from Jessica's fingers and shattered on the marble, scattering into 1,000 diamond shards. The sound seemed to break the spell. The whispers turned into a hum, the hum into a deafening din. But I didn't take my eyes off Marcus. I watched the carefully constructed facade behind which he had hidden all these years crack, crumble, and turn to dust. I hadn't planned this, but now, watching their world, a world in which I was merely an extra, crumble at my feet, I realized, the sweetest victories always come uninvited. The next few minutes resembled an absurd performance, chaos, clothed in polite smiles and expensive suits. My mother was the first to recover. Her face, contorted by an attempt to combine shock and polite manners, was almost pitiful. She flew up to me, grabbing my sleeve. "Sophie, my dear," she babbled, her voice a piercing whisper, "why didn't you tell us about your position? We're your family." I slowly, never taking my eyes off her whitened fingers clutching my silk, took another sip. The champagne was already warm, but the taste of triumph was cold and sharp. "You didn't ask, Mother." I looked her straight in the eye. "You were all too busy celebrating Marcus's achievements to be interested in my little consulting job." James Harrison stood nearby, clearly uncomfortable, but his gaze was filled with burning curiosity. He'd seen the hole in the Sterling's hull and now understood where it had come from. "Miss Mitchell, I had no idea this was a family event for you," he said, choosing his words carefully. Perhaps we could discuss the merger over such an unusual glass? A merger? It wasn't a voice, but a hoarse cry. Marcus lunged forward, pushing his mother away. His face was wet with sweat, his eyes wild. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin painfully. What merger, Sophie? What is he talking about? I didn't flinch. Slowly, with exaggerated care, I freed my hand from his grip. Red marks were already appearing on the white surface. The one in which Aurora Consulting is considering buying Sterling Industries, I said in a calm, businesslike tone, as if I were in a meeting. Then I turned to Harrison, ignoring my brother, who seemed on the verge of collapse. Although after tonight, I'm reconsidering my decision regarding the acquisition. Marcus paled so much he looked like a wax figure. Jessica, his radiant bride, swayed as if her invisible corset had suddenly been tightened, cutting off her air supply. But then you'll be my... His lips moved silently, unable to form a word. Boss, I finished for him. My voice was calm, almost gentle. Yes, Marcus, that's how it will be. Funny how life sometimes turns out, huh? It wasn't just a phrase, it was a cold, sharpened blade, and I stabbed it exactly where it needed to be. My father finally moved. He pushed through the ring of onlookers, his usually haughty face crimson with anger and confusion. Wait a minute, he barked, jabbing his finger into the air. You can't just come here and ruin your brother's wedding with your fantasies. Your imagination. James Harrison cleared his throat softly. His presence, his calm confidence, was like a wall separating their storm from my reality. I assure you, sir, he said with a slight but unmistakable coldness, your daughter is exactly who she claims to be. Aurora Consulting is not a fantasy. It is the largest consulting firm in the country, and Ms. Mitchell built it from the ground up. I know, we've been trying to negotiate this merger for months. I watched as the truth dawned on my father. His cheeks, flushed just a moment ago, turned gray. I saw that very past emerge in his eyes, his mocking laugh when I told him about my business plan at 22, his condescending pat on the shoulder. Don't get carried away, daughter, the world is cruel, get a stable position. And the same voice, full of pride, when he called everyone he knew to push Marcus into an internship at Sterling. But the money, my mother stammered, her eyes darted around, trying to grasp something tangible. All those times you said you couldn't help with the family expenses, the roof repair, the trip to Europe. Oh, you mean the $50,000 you borrowed from my savings for Marcus's MBA? I asked. My voice was smooth as glass, but inside, everything was seething. I felt the bitterness of that 19-year-old in the coffee shop, saving every cent for his future, and then giving it all away because family is more important. The money you never paid back because, and I quote, Marcus needs it more for his future. And my future, it seemed, could wait. Jessica stepped forward, her luxurious dress rustling with an angry whisper. She looked not at me, but at Marcus, and her eyes no longer betrayed admiration, but panicked calculation. Marcus, my dear, did you know about this? About her company? Of course not, he blurted, his voice breaking into a shriek. He swallowed, trying to regain control. Sophie, she was always jealous of my success. This must be some kind of mistake, or a prank. Harrison slowly raised an eyebrow. It was a subtle gesture, but it resonated louder than any shout. The only mistake, Mr. Mitchell, apparently was your misunderstanding of your sister's position in the business world. He paused, letting his words take on weight. Aurora Consulting's annual revenue exceeds the combined revenue of Sterling Industries over the past 5 years. A deathly silence fell over the room, even the orchestra fell silent. Every guest, every important person Marcus had invited for show, now regarded our family as a sensation. The perfect wedding, the perfect career, the perfect life, all of it had crumbled to dust in a matter of minutes, and that same loser in the blue dress was to blame. I believe, I said quietly but clearly, we should continue this discussion in a more private place. I nodded to Harrison, putting all my gratitude into the gesture. James, would you mind giving me a moment alone with the family? He responded with a slight, understanding bow and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, which respectfully parted before him. I led them, my father, my mother, Marcus, and a pale Jessica, into a small meeting room adjacent to the ballroom. I latched the massive door. The sound of the celebration suddenly became muffled. as if we were in an aquarium. The silence inside was deafening, dense. "How dare you?" Marcus breathed, and it wasn't a scream anymore, but a strangled, hoarse sound, full of animal rage. "This is my day, my only goddamn day. You couldn't just let me have this. At least this." I laughed. The sound came out short, dry, like the snap of a broken branch. "The only thing?" I asked. "You've had everything handed to you on a silver platter your whole life, Marcus. Dad's connections got you into Sterling, Mom's family diamonds paid for your prestigious MBA, my savings, saved up by working nights, financed your failed startup attempts, and meanwhile, I was building, brick by brick, night after sleepless night, something real, something that will outlive us all, and all, completely alone. We tried to protect you." My mother wrung her hands, her voice held a familiar, practiced note of sacrifice. "The business world, it's merciless to women, we wanted to protect you from that." "No, Mom." I shook my head, and at that moment I felt not sadness, but a terribly empty feeling. "You didn't protect me, you ignored me. Every victory I achieved, every milestone I reached, you dismissed them as insignificant, because they didn't fit into your little, comfortable fairy tale, where Marcus was always the prince." My father took a step forward, the crimson anger on his face gave way to another, more familiar mask, the mask of a businessman negotiating. "Okay, Sophie, that's enough, let's be reasonable," he said, leveling his tone. "We're family, surely we can come to an agreement. Find a solution that benefits everyone, now that the situation is clear." I looked at him, and suddenly everything became crystal clear, painfully clear. "So now that you know I have power, that I have money that eclipses your dreams, you want to be part of it?" I slowly shook my head. The merger with Sterling, it was a gesture of courtesy toward Harrison, who, unlike his vice president, I glanced at Marcus, is a capable leader forced to deal with the consequences of bad personnel decisions. But after tonight, I lingered on my brother's face, where hatred and panic mingled. "I think it's time for some structural changes, starting from the very top." "You can't do this," Marcus blurted out, but it was no longer an order, but a hoarse, lost whisper. All his arrogance, all his veneer, shattered, revealing a naked, childish fear. "My position, my future, everything." "Your position was always built on sand, Marcus," I interrupted, each word falling like a heavy stone. "You've lost 3 major clients this year alone. The last one was because of your rude emails, which, by the way, they kindly forwarded to me. The only reason you're still sitting in your vice president's office is because of your engagement to Jessica and her daddy." I straightened a crease in my simple dark blue dress. The gesture was now calm, almost ritualistic. This dress had been my talisman of discretion, and now it had become a symbol of victory. "But don't worry," I continued, my voice taking on an icy, businesslike tone. "When Aurora finally acquires Sterling, we'll find a position for you, one that matches your actual qualifications. There must be a vacancy at the company, say, for a senior assistant junior analyst." Jessica made a sharp, choking sound, as if she'd been punched in the gut. "My father, he won't let this happen, he's on the board of directors," she blurted out, but there was no longer any confidence in her eyes, only panicked calculation. "Your father," I said softly, almost sympathetically, "called me last week. He urged, coaxed, almost begged, for the merger to happen as soon as possible. My dear Sterling Industries is sinking, and Aurora isn't just a straw, it's the only lifeline within 100 miles. The gravity of the situation finally crashed down on Marcus with all its unbearable weight. His legs seemed to dissolve. He didn't sit down, but collapsed into the nearest chair, clutching his head in his hands. He stared into space, and images of the past flashed before his eyes, all those taunts, the condescending pats on the shoulder, my modest silence. "All this time," he whispered, his voice filled with a kind of absurd amazement, "while we were laughing at you, while we were calling your work a tiny little firm, you were building an empire." The pain that had been building for years suddenly burst forth in a short, bitter laugh. "I tried to tell you, every time you bragged about your new position, and I said I was doing just fine too, every time Mom asked if I wanted to finally find a real job. I tried, but you never listened. You were too busy painting a picture of the perfect family, with Golden Boy Marcus as its crown jewel, and I was just a pale backdrop." I took a deep breath, turned, and headed for the door. The air in the room had become heavy, stuffy, and I needed to get out of there. Well, now you know the truth, and everything, absolutely everything will change. Sophie, please. My mother's voice wavered, she extended her hand, and the gesture was so pitiful, so helpless. We're still a family. My hand was already resting on the cold brass handle. I froze, without turning around. Family. The word hung in the air, heavy as lead. I nevertheless turned to look at them one last time, at my father, already counting the losses, at my mother, searching for a saving word, at Marcus, crushed by his own insignificance. Family supports, family believes, family doesn't mock you to your face or betray you behind your back. You weren't family when I toiled nights to build something of my own. You can't suddenly remember family ties now that my name has become more important than your illusions. I turned the handle sharply and walked out. I didn't slam the door, but simply left it ajar, as if our meeting was over and there was nothing more to discuss. James Harrison was waiting for me at the bar, shielding himself slightly from prying eyes with a glass of mineral water. His gaze was calm and understanding. He'd seen similar family squabbles in other high-end offices. Shall we discuss the terms of the merger, Miss Mitchell? He asked quietly, pulling me aside slightly. It seems we now have a new context for negotiations. I nodded, and a genuine, slight smile finally appeared on my lips, not a smile of triumph, but of release. Yes, James, I think it's time for a complete overhaul of Sterling Industries, and perhaps we should start at the very top of the management pyramid. As we walked to a more private corner of the room, I felt their gazes on my back, burning, withering, full of horror. My simple dark blue dress, chosen for invisibility, now felt like the strongest armor. They had been looking through me for years, now they were looking at me, and this was only the first, deafening lesson. The weeks after Marcus's wedding passed with precisely the rhythm I had predicted, a hurricane of calls, messages, and attempts to get through to me through my secretary. The air was thick with family theater. Sophie, darling, we need to talk, like human beings, you're our daughter. Mom, her voice, full of obsequious tremors. What have you done? He won't leave the house. You've ruined my brother's career. Father, anger masking panicked shame. We urgently need to discuss my position in the new structure. I have proposals. Marcus, no longer requests, but pathetic attempts at bargaining. My father insists on a meeting, he says you're ignoring his calls. Jessica, the chill of an impending divorce pierced the text. I put my phone aside. I had a merger that needed to be executed not just successfully, but flawlessly. On the morning of the crucial Sterling Industries board meeting, I stood in my office on the 50th floor of the Aurora. Instead of adjusting my modest dress, I buttoned my perfectly tailored Armani jacket. The fabric was heavy, expensive, and every gram of it spoke of power. The disguise was over. There was a knock on the door. Emma, my assistant, entered, her expression impassive as usual, though I detected a hint of irritation. Your brother, Miss Mitchell, again, for the third time this week, he insists. I glanced at my watch. There was an hour left before the meeting that would forever change the fate of Sterling and everyone involved. Let him in, Emma, I said, turning to the window, beyond which lay the entire city. Better to sort this out now, before we start signing papers. The door opened, and Marcus burst into the office, or rather, his shadow. Instead of the usual pressed dandy in an expensive suit, I saw a man with a rumpled shirt, a askew tie, and dark circles under his eyes. He reeked of despair, like bad cologne. Sophie. His voice was hoarse, without its usual velvety notes. Please, I can't get through to you on the phone, you have to listen to me. I'm listening, I said, slowly lowering myself into the chair behind my massive polished walnut desk. My posture was open but cold, although, frankly, I'm not sure I have anything new to add to your 23 voicemails and, what was that, Emma? 38 text messages? He ran his hand over his face, and I heard the slight scrape of his stubble against his palm. Look, I know, I was terrible, at the wedding, and always, I talked down to you about your work, but Sophie, you can't just swallow Sterling. This is my whole life. Your whole life, I drawled, letting it sink in like poison, was handed to you. On a silver platter, every step, every door, every business card with a fancy title. It was all arranged by Dad, paid for by Mom, or stolen, no, borrowed from me. "It's not fair," he shouted, and that same old, capricious light flashed in his eyes. That light was the last straw. I stood up abruptly, bracing my palms on the cold surface of the table, leaning across it. "Unfair?" My voice grew quieter, but that only made each word sting more. Was it unfair to take my 50,000, which I saved up delivering pizzas and babysitting other people's children, for your prestigious MBA? Was it unfair to make fun of my tiny office for 3 years in a row at Christmas, while I was at 3 in the morning plotting a strategy that would make me a millionaire? Is it unfair to watch your sister bang her head against closed doors, and not only not help, but even laugh at her, calling her a loser? You don't know what injustice is, Marcus, you only know how to perpetrate it. He took a step back, as if from a physical blow, his shoulders hunched. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and for the first time in my life, it sounded not like a mantra, but like a deep-seated ache, maybe even sincere. My heart sank, an old, stupid reflex, but I quickly suppressed it. Regret is cheap currency, Marcus, it doesn't cancel the bill, and it doesn't change what happens in an hour. I glanced at the large wall clock. "Board meeting, you should prepare." What will happen to me?" he asked, and his voice held that same childish note that used to beg his father for a new car. I sat back slowly, studying him. This wasn't my brother anymore, this was the subject of a personnel task. "It's up to you, Aurora pays for results, not family connections. If you want to stay at Sterling after the merger, you'll have to earn it, every day, with every report, from scratch." "So, starting from the very bottom?" He swallowed, his face contorted in disgust. "Work like a regular clerk? Without my office? Without a secretary? Or you can choose severance pay." I raised my hand, cutting off his objections. "The amount will be calculated according to the law, not a dollar more, your choice." At that moment, the door swung open again. My parents stood there, out of breath, and behind them, I saw Emma's confused face, trying to hold them back. "Sophie!" Mom burst in first, her whisper louder than any shout. "We've been trying to get to you for weeks." "I've been busy," I replied, without changing my tone. "Running my, what did you call it, tiny company requires a lot of attention." My father stepped forward, pushing my mother aside. I saw a familiar mask on his face, the mask of a negotiator about to close a lucrative deal. "Darling, let's be reasonable, we mustn't ruin our relationship. You can't just ruin your brother's career out of spite over old grievances. It was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed, and the sound was so sharp that my mother flinched. "Is that what we call the years you thought I was a failure now? The years of your neglect?" "We were wrong," my mother exclaimed, wringing her hands. Her manicure glinted in the lamplight. "But we're family, Sophie. Doesn't that mean anything?" Silently, I opened the top drawer of my desk. There, under the folders, lay an old photograph in a simple frame. I took it out and placed it on the desk in front of me, the last official family photo, taken a year before I registered Aurora, Indiana. They're all smiling, perfectly dressed, happy, and I'm slightly off to the side, in a simple blue dress, with a shadow in my eyes. I was a stranger to them even then. Family meant something when I asked Dad for a loan guarantee of $25,000 for my first office. He said it was too risky. Family meant something when I missed your dinners because I was closing my first big deal. You called it failure to prioritize. Family meant something all those times you toasted Marcus's smashing success, selling 5 boxes of printer paper at a discount, and that same day I acquired my first company, and you didn't even ask how it was. I ran my finger along the glass covering the photograph. Now it's just business, and I'm managing the merger. There was a knock at the door. Emma entered, her face impassive and professional. "Miss Mitchell, the Sterling Industries Board of Directors has assembled and is waiting for you in the meeting room on the 20th floor." "Thank you, Emma, I'm leaving." I stood up, straightened my jacket, and glanced at the 3 people frozen in front of me. "There's a monitor with a live feed in the guest waiting area. You can watch it if you'd like. I think it will be educational." The Sterling Industries boardroom was decorated in the spirit of old-fashioned patriarchal luxury. dark wood, heavy drapes, portraits of former executives on the walls. When I entered, accompanied by Harrison, conversations instantly died down. 15 people, most of them men over 60, looked at me with poorly concealed curiosity and apprehension. Their world was about to be turned upside down. James Harrison gestured to the main seat at the long table. "Miss Mitchell," his voice rang out loud and clear in the silence, "we're ready to begin." The next hour was merciless and flawless, like surgery performed without anesthesia. I laid out Aurora's plans for Sterling, figures, graphs, forecasts. I mentioned the names of managers who had long since become dead weight. Listed unpromising departments that were facing dissolution or a complete overhaul. The air in the room hummed with tension. Some board members, more pragmatic, nodded, seeing my words as the only chance for salvation. Others, those who had basked for decades in the glow of the company's former glory, looked at me as if I were speaking an ancient, barbaric tongue. And finally, my words sounded like a hammer on an anvil. "We will conduct a complete overhaul of the entire management chain. Every position will be justified, every manager will be evaluated. The era of sinecures based on family, connections, or long-standing debts ends today." Through the transparent glass wall separating the boardroom from the waiting area, I saw them, my family. Marcus sat hunched over, his face hidden in his hands, shame, despair, I don't know what else. My parents stood nearby, frozen, like monuments to themselves. My mother was whispering something silently, looking straight at me but not seeing me. My father was looking at the floor, his shoulders, always so confident, now hunched under an invisible weight. For the first time, they saw not Sophie, their unlucky daughter, but Miss Mitchell, a force that could wipe their small, carefully constructed world off the map with a single stroke of a pen. The scale of what was happening finally dawned on them. As the meeting concluded and the room began to empty, James Harrison approached me. His eyes betrayed genuine respect, bordering on a touch of apprehension. "Brilliant, Miss Mitchell, as always, although, may I ask, what about your brother? His position? He will be considered in the usual manner, just like everyone else." My voice didn't waver. "If he's willing and able to work, there's a place for him, an entry-level position in the sales department, on a standard basis, no bonuses, no benefits, from scratch." Harrison nodded slowly, something akin to admiration flickering in his gaze. "You are showing more generosity than you might otherwise. Many in your position would act differently." "It's not generosity, James." I gathered the documents into a leather folder. "It's not revenge, it's simply a rational approach. I'm building something that will last. And a solid building has no place for flimsy, rotten beams." As I stepped into the waiting area, I saw they were still there. They seemed smaller than in my childhood memories, where they were giants deciding my fate, smaller than in my nightmares, where their taunts were deafening. "So, is that all?" Marcus's voice was empty, lifeless. He looked up at me, and his eyes were filled with utter bewilderment. "Everything is collapsing, just like that, in one day?" "Everything collapsed years ago, Marcus," I said quietly. "You were simply too busy staring at your own reflection in the shop windows to hear the crash." I turned to my parents. My father tried to straighten up, regaining his businesslike demeanor. "New employment contracts will be delivered to you tomorrow," I said in a flat, formal tone. "For everyone remaining in the new structure, please read the terms and conditions carefully." "Sophie," my mother took a step forward, tears finally streaming down her cheeks, washing away her perfect makeup. "We were blind, we didn't see you, we didn't see who you really were. Is there no chance to fix it all? To start over?" Start over. The words hung in the air. I thought of the thousands of dinners where my words fell on deaf ears, of the hundreds of holidays where my victories went unnoticed, of the decades when my dreams were considered less important than Marcus's ambitions. Bitterness rose in my throat, but I swallowed it. "Start over." I slowly shook my head. "That would mean erasing the past, and I don't want to erase it. All those years of neglect, all those kind advice to come to terms with reality, all that quiet condescension. They taught me everything I know, they toughened me up, they made me who I am standing before you now." "And who are you?" my father asked. His voice wasn't a challenge, but a sincere, agonizing question. I looked at them in turn, at my mother, who always wanted stability for me. At my father, who believed only in the power of connections. at my brother, who took fate's gifts for granted. I am the one who single-handedly built a company worth more than anything you could ever wish for, Marcus. I am the CEO who just acquired the firm you considered the pinnacle of the world, and I am the daughter who finally stopped looking to you for approval and found her own path, the most important one. I turned and headed for the elevators. Halfway there, I stopped, not looking back. The contracts are tomorrow, whether you sign or not is your choice, but whatever you choose, remember, nothing will ever be the same again, ever. As the elevator doors slid smoothly closed, I caught a last glimpse of their reflection in the polished steel, 3 figures, frozen in an empty, luxurious space that no longer rightfully belonged to them. They watched the doors close, and for the first time in their lives, they saw me. That night, in the quiet of my penthouse, overlooking the entire shining city, my city now, I approached the safe. Inside, in a velvet case, lay my grandmother's locket. I opened it. Inside, yellowed with age, lay a tiny note, written in her shaky but firm handwriting. Success isn't about who believes in you at the end, it's about believing in yourself from the very beginning. I clutched the locket in my palm, feeling the cold metal. It warmed from the heat of my skin. I smiled, looking at the lights below. Each light was someone's story, someone's struggle. My struggle didn't begin at Marcus's wedding. It began when a young girl in a simple dress decided her dreams were worth more than everyone else's doubts. The wedding was just the moment when the curtain fell and everyone saw the scenery for what it was. Now they knew, everyone, who I was, not a family misunderstanding, not a silent shadow, but the architect who took the bricks of their neglect and built a fortress from them. And this realization, this quiet, inescapable knowledge, warmed my soul far more than any, even the sweetest revenge. Revenge is the end, but what I felt was the beginning of something completely new, and mine alone.